Well, good morning. I don't know about you, but from time to time, life and living prompt questions in my mind for which I have no answer. Oh, I'm not necessarily talking about questions like who am I, why am I here, and where am I going? Those kinds of questions are indeed good and proper questions that everyone ought to consider, but the ones I'm thinking of have more to do with what I see and hear in everyday life and conversation. Here are just two or three examples. Why, for example, do people complain about the economy, complaining they never have any money when I see them living in huge houses, driving $70,000 vehicles, and taking the 24-foot boat and equally fancy camper to the lake for the week? Don't they know where their money's going? Do they not understand how horribly expensive it is to maintain that lifestyle? Or are they complaining because they have to pay taxes on all of that in order to fund the government? Or is it maybe a combination of both of those? Well, it seems to me that the priorities of some folks sometimes kind of get mixed up. Instead of a worldview of service and generosity, it sometimes becomes one of who has the most and the biggest toys. It becomes a worldview of, well, I'll just say it, selfishness and self-centeredness. And while we're on the subject of $70,000 vehicles, why is it that people complain when the price of gasoline goes up a nickel? Yet these same people seem to have no clue how to drive in a money-saving way. They drive self-proclaimed gas hogs, drive 80 miles an hour in a 60-mile-an-hour zone. They zip from lane to lane, they accelerate quickly, they brake hard, and they generally become a liability on the road. And these are the same people who, well, they're the first to spin out usually when the road conditions are icy, having to tow their vehicles to the body shop. These are also the ones who pay hundreds of dollars a month for insurance, yet they don't seem to understand the relationship between their driving habits and insurance costs. These are the ones that you want to avoid at all costs when you're on the road. And now on the other side of the coin, what is it that prompts some people to continue giving, continue serving, continue loving, even when it hurts and even when the gratitude isn't there for what was done for others? Where do people get the energy, the drive, and the passion for giving out water in the heat of summer to the homeless, helping stock a food pantry that serves everyone in need, cleaning up a grossly overgrown yard for an old veteran who's incapable of doing it himself? What makes people volunteer for service to others? Paying the check for someone in the military at a restaurant, giving an oversized tip to the wait person, pumping gas for someone who has no money but they need transportation to get to work, driving a neighbor to her doctor's appointment, volunteering at the local public school, or one of any number of different acts of kindness and service. Where does the compassion for others come from? What makes people willing to give of their time, their energy, and their resources? What is it about people that in some cases involves true sacrifice? And speaking of sacrifice, why is it that people will intentionally put themselves in harm's way in order to save another person from some kind of harm or even death? Even for someone they don't know, they'll do that. Some people will give their lives in order to save another. Where does that compulsion come from? What makes people do that? Well, I think I may have a handle on answers to the questions I asked first, those questions that involve what some people might call self-centeredness, greed, and pride. But the questions regarding service and sacrifice, I confess I don't have the answers. Some would say that it is the Christian or the person of faith who does these things. Well, I agree, but I also know Christians who are self-centered and prideful. I think they have some way to go in becoming more mature and Christ-like, but we'll just leave it at that. And I also know people who are nowhere close to being people of faith who exhibit great compassion and sacrifice for others. The rule, if there is one in this case, obviously has numerous exceptions. Well, I'll leave you with this today. Which are you? Are you one of those who's always complaining about life, even though you've been abundantly blessed with so much more than what's necessary for life? Are you one of those who takes for granted the things that others are praying for? Or are you one who, person of faith or not, is generous, giving, and yes, maybe even sacrificial in life and living? Do you treat others, regardless of gender, race, religion, identity, or nationality, with dignity and with respect? And do you take to heart what Paul, the great apostle, told Timothy? Listen to this. Command those who are rich in this present world not to be arrogant, nor to put their hope in wealth, which is so uncertain, but rather to put their hope in God, who richly provides us with everything for our enjoyment. And then Paul says this to Timothy, command them to do good, to be rich in good deeds, and to be generous and willing to share. May God bless you this day.